Okay, perfect. So hello, everybody, and welcome. It's been a while since the Baseball Cards Research Committee did a stay home with SABR, but my gosh, we are creeping up, it seems like, on practically a year of virtual events. So I call this the history of baseball cards as told by Hank Aaron. The first time I did it, there might have been some people who showed up and thought, oh, Hank Aaron's going to give a talk. Well, unfortunately, right, we all know now that no, Hank Aaron won't be doing the talking. It will be me. But the point is that Hank Aaron played for so long and his baseball cards kind of came in just the right era that it's possible to flip through a stack of his baseball cards and learn a lot about the history and evolution of baseball cards. So in some small way, his baseball cards can tell us the history of baseball cards. So with that, click, there we go. With that, obviously, I think everybody here is aware that we lost the hammer just this past week, and as if there weren't enough of a succession of just devastating, crushing baseball hero losses, the hammer, I think, maybe is at the top of everybody's list or awfully close. And so borrowing something that my friend Sean Gibson from the Josh Gibson Foundation did at his talk yesterday, I'm going to just ask for a quick moment of silence. And for those of you on mute, that'll be easy, but we'll take a quick moment of silence for Hank Aaron. Okay, and we're back. If anybody logged in just then, they're like, I can't get my audio to work. I can't get my audio to work. Anyways, all righty. So the story will not literally be told by Hank Aaron. I'll be pinch hitting for the hammer today. I'm Jason Schwartz. I'm from SABR Chicago. I'm also the co-chair of the Baseball Cards Research Committee. I'm a Hank Aaron collector, and I will say a very amateur baseball card historian. And I acknowledge the Magnolia chapter. They invited me to do this talk last year. And of course, when the hammer passed, I thought, maybe I normally don't upcycle, as they say, my presentations, but I thought, this one might sort of speak to a lot of people right now that are that have Hank Aaron on their mind. So just a couple little things from my collection, to kind of kick off the intro page. There's the little photo I showed some of you during the pregame, and then I know one of you in the pregame also mentioned having every Hank Aaron Topps card. So that was a collection I was proud to put together myself. This is a display case I have in my house that shows all of the base Topps cards, the All-Stars, and then a few other Topps odds and ends, and some other brands as well, but covering Hank Aaron's playing career. So that's really the centerpiece of my entire baseball card collection. And for those of you who've been to my place, it's sort of the decor theme of the entire basement is Hank Aaron. So, all righty. Here we go. We will jump in. So Hank Aaron timeline, what I'm going to be covering today primarily is 1954 to 1976. That's Hank Aaron's major league career. People recall in December that Major League Baseball attached major league status, we'll say, to various Negro leagues. And initially, there were some folks who thought, oh, maybe that gives Hank Aaron the home run record. I'll indicate Hank Aaron's year with the Indy Clowns was after the 1920 to 48 period. So by MLB standards, we'll say that still wouldn't be considered MLB. So 54 to 76 is what I'm covering. But for those of you that are familiar with baseball card history, that is almost exactly the Topps monopoly era. So from 1956 to 1980, Topps pretty much had the whole place to themselves, right? Prior to 1956, Bowman was a big competitor. And after 1980, in the 1981 season, Donruss and Fleer showed up. And then, of course, it was only a matter of time before we saw Upper Deck and Score and other brands as well. So I did a little bit of research to see if Hank Aaron's career lined up best with the Topps monopoly era. I think Brooks Robinson was slightly closer, and I think in some way Frank Robinson was about a tie. But the point is, among the all-time greats or among any MLB player, Hank Aaron's baseball cards almost best cover the Topps monopoly era. Okay, so I mentioned we'll really cover 54 to 76, but I thought I'd kick it off with 1953. So in 1953, there was no Hank Aaron card. right? Hank Aaron was playing down in Jacksonville. But the question we can ask, knowing what we know about baseball cards, is would this happen today? Would a player as good as Hank Aaron, right, a prospect that good, the year before he made the major leagues, have no baseball card? The answer, I think, is no, that probably wouldn't happen today. Almost certainly, a prospect as good as Hank Aaron will have some sort of baseball card, probably with Bowman or something like that, the year before making the major leagues. But another interesting question that we can ask now, of course, back then, it was very common not to have a card. In fact, it'd be very rare to have a card prior to making the major leagues. Exception would be if it was a set that was specific to the Pacific Coast League or the particular minor league you were in. But something like a Topps flagship set having someone who'd never played would be fairly unusual at any rate. Okay. But we can ask the question, if Hank Aaron had a 1953 Topps card, what team would it show? Well, the easy answer is the Braves, but something to learn, 1953, players in the first half of the set are shown as Boston Braves. Players in the second half of the set, roughly speaking, are shown as Milwaukee Braves, right? So one of the fun things to do out there among just collectors, hobbyists that have graphics programs is make their own cards that never were. So that's a choice that presents itself to anyone making I'll call it fantasy or custom card of a 1953 Topps Hank Aaron, is what hat do you want to give them? Interestingly, Topps in 1991 or two, now I'm not remembering, came up with their own 1953 archive set and decided not to answer the question about which hat to give. However, you can see at the bottom, he's indicated with the Milwaukee Braves. So Topps, I suppose, settled that. So we'll jump into 1954. And the way this is going to progress is I'm mostly just going to go through every single year and hopefully have something interesting to say, or if not, have something uninteresting to say. But the point is I'll have something to say about pretty much every year, sometimes multiple things. So 1954, his famous, we could even say now, iconic rookie card, 128. And I say, does Topps owe Bowman a thank you? What do I mean by that? I have the checklist for the Topps set, cards 1 to 250 down along the bottom of the page. Everywhere you see a blue dot, which is pretty much almost the entire left-hand side of that chart, indicates a player who is in the Topps and Bowman set, in both sets at the same time. Yogi Berra would be a good example of that. Eddie Matthews, Duke Snyder, Hoyt Wilhelm. So something happened around the second half of the set where Topps essentially ran out of players they could use. The players at that point they hadn't already put in their 1954 set seemed to be signed to Bowman exclusively. And so what you saw in the second half of the 1954 Topps set was a gigantic preponderance of rookies, coaches, and managers. I don't have the numbers on me right now, but I think there's something like 19 coach cards in the second half of the 1954 Topps set, and I think there were 0 or 1 in the first half. But at any rate, second half of the set, starting at card 126, right? So here's card 128, Hank Aaron. It could be that if Topps had rights to all of those Bowman players, Hank Aaron never would have made the set. So that's obviously speculative, but I will say that the second half of the set was so loaded with rookies and coaches that I like to think that it's thanks to those Bowman contracts that Hank even made it into our set. Okay, 1955. Well, now it's hammer time because Hank Aaron gets 3 cool looking cards. He's in Topps and Bowman. Those are the ones on the right-hand side, but he's also in a 1955 kind of extra Topps set called Double Headers, which is a really cool concept for a set. It's Bowman's last hurrah, but there's still some battling over contracts. And my understanding is the 4 cards that you see highlighted, certainly by Feller, Musial, and Whitey Ford, these are actually players who Topps thought they were going to have in their 1955 set, but over contract disputes and other things with Bowman, ended up pulling or not doing. And if you look at the 1955 Topps checklist, there's actually 4 holes in it. In other words, there's numbers where there's simply no baseball card. And the either speculation or research is that those spots in the checklist had been reserved for those 4 players. So luckily, Hank Aaron did make it. He was with Topps and with Bowman. And I would say for collectors, that is a very nice thing. I know some Mickey Mantle collectors who are kind of bummed that there's just not a 1954 Topps Mickey Mantle other than the Sports Illustrated insert. For Hank Aaron, though, he checks off every year. Okay, I mentioned a little bit of a backstory on the 1955 card, and sometimes I'll call this in the presentation cardboard clairvoyance. So who was Hank Aaron in 1955? Well, he was a pretty good young player. I don't know that anybody thought he was a Hall of Famer. I'm certain nobody thought he was the home run king or one of the greatest home run hitters of all time. However, back of the card, cartoon. I love this. Cartoon on the back of his card. True or false, no one has ever hit a homer over the roof of Yankee Stadium. And it says for the answer, true. Not even Babe Ruth. So we now have Hank Aaron connected to Babe Ruth on the 1955 Topps card. But what's more, right? And this is one of these stories where you'll read some accounts where people say, yes, he did it. And you'll read other accounts, including Eyewitness, that say, no, he didn't do that. But the one player who's storied to have hit the ball all the way out of Yankee Stadium is Josh Gibson, right? So in a way, we can look at this trivia question and we can say the back of Hank Aaron's card tied together Hank Aaron, Babe Ruth, and Josh Gibson, which for 1955, that's cardboard clairvoyance. Okay, 1956, a lot of things going on. So this is the true start of the Topps monopoly. We also potentially, whenever I have a question mark, it means no, not really, although it may be widely believed. First Topps team cards, well, there's the Milwaukee Braves from the 1956 set. Hank Aaron or Hank Error? Well, why would we say that? For a couple of reasons. Some of you know, and I have the actual photograph here to show it. Some of you know on Hank Aaron's 1956 Topps card, what's supposed to be Hank Aaron sort of sliding or barreling into home plate is in fact Willie Mays. So there you go. So we've got a little bit of an error there. And then if you flip over his 1956 Topps card, his birth date, and this is kind of, might be hard for you to see on your screen, but they indicate that his birthday is February 10th, 1934. So we've got another error, and his birthday, of course, is February 5th. So Topps did make mistakes. Some of you see a Cubs player, and you may recognize that as Ken Hubbs. Unfortunately, Topps used that photo 4 years or 3 or 4 years after Ken Hubbs died on the card of a Cubs teammate, Dick Ellsworth. So Topps certainly has made some mistakes through the years. I'll highlight some as we go. But Hank Aaron, interestingly, has a little bit of a streak with Topps of error cards, as you'll see soon. So 2 of them on his 1956. But putting the wrong guy on a card, right? So putting Willie Mays on the Hank Aaron card and calling it Hank Aaron, that is a long and proud history. That has a long and proud history with baseball cards. One of my favorite ones comes from the 1933 Gowdy set with Luke Sewell. And if you just look at that, you might say, how would anybody know that that's not Luke Sewell, right? Maybe that could be Luke Sewell. Well, okay. However, if you're going to trust one person, I would trust Luke Sewell, who autographed the back of this card saying, "This is Steve O'Neill," signed Luke Sewell. So there you go. And then there's a funny one here, which is Topps with this Al Kaline card, which really just came out recently. My co-chair on the cards committee, Nick, used that same photo on a custom card he sent to Al Kaline to sign. And Al Kaline, as you can see, was gracious enough to sign, but put an arrow and made sure that Nick knew, that's not me. Well, anyways, Topps must not have seen that autograph because they used Al Kaline the following year with that same photo. So some of these are fun. And this goes on to present day. I just saw a posting on SABR Baseball Cards where somebody identified much more recent cards with the wrong picture. There are a lot of these, but a big history. So I mentioned 56, that's traditionally thought of as the first year that Topps introduced team cards. But before Topps was really Topps in 1952, before their big set that really made them a name in baseball card circles, they actually had a set of nothing but team cards in 1951. And so the first Topps team cards, one might say, were 1951, not 56. Let's go to 1957, Hank Aaron's MVP year, also the year that he won the pennant for the Braves with a walk-off, and that the Braves won the World Series. Well, we talked about, is it Hank Aaron or Hank Error? Well, I think folks can see that there is something not right on this Hank Aaron card, which is that he's batting left. And you can see he's not just playing with the photographer and making a joke. You can tell the 44 on his uniform number is reversed. So this was just Topps making a mistake with the photo. 1957, though, stands out in baseball card history. It's really the debut of the 2.5 by 3.5 inch baseball card. That's the size today. If you buy a pack of Topps, good luck finding one at Target or Walmart. But if you find one, that's what size the baseball cards are. That came in 1957. Earlier than 57, whether it's Topps or Bowman, the 5 or so years preceding, the cards are a little bit bigger, not much, but a little bit. And then prior to 1952, whether it's Topps or Bowman, the cards tended to be smaller than standard size. And of course, the Gowdies and the T206s would be considerably smaller. The birth of year-by-year statistics. We can look at the back of Hank Aaron's 1957 Topps, and we can see complete major league statistics, and we can even see minor league totals for Eau Claire and Jacksonville, with quite a few statistical categories. I've put his 1956 beneath it, just as contrast that the Topps standard prior to 1957 tended to be most current year and career, but not year by year. So we will look to see, is this the first time that happened? Is this the, we'll call it the Sabermetrician's rookie card? So some of you may know that way back in 1911, year-by-year statistics were already a thing. So there's the gold border set. I've got Home Run Baker, and we see some statistics for 08, 09, and 1910, just games, batting average, and fielding average. So not a ton of stuff for the sabermetricians to play with, but nonetheless. And also, it's worth noting that only 3 years were used, not complete career statistics. So 1957 Topps definitely broke new ground in terms of the range of categories and also the number of years presented. The other set, the double folders, similarly, a little bit better in terms of what's presented: games, at bats, runs, hits, and stolen bases, and batting average, which is known as percent. And then the fielding: games, putouts, assists, errors, and percent or fielding percentage. But one of the flaws that made this very unpopular, even with the more analytic collectors out there, was the statistics were upside down. Okay. All righty. So anyways, in 1957, we also saw the error of Hank Aaron's photo being flipped. That also has a long and proud history. So thank you, Andrew Ehrenstein, who I believe is on the call today. He acquainted me with one of the earliest such examples I'd seen, which is Eddie Grant, the 1911 T205 gold border card. If you just looked at it by itself, you wouldn't think anything was wrong with it. But Andrew was able to put it side by side with the Paul Thompson photograph, and you can tell from a number of things, but probably most evidently just the way the cap is tipped, that something went wrong there. Buddy Lewis, another one, if you just look at it, you'd think seems okay. And the W logo on the cap, Washington Senators, symmetric, so a little hard to tell that something's going on unless you know what handed he bats. You wouldn't have much clue, but there's one other way you could figure it out. Buck Martinez, that's when I was a kid. That was a super fun one to get. And again, the hat logo, not immediately obvious, but the Brewers across the chest and the uniform number are
doing anything
and then
to try and
much more later in my collecting life, almost toward the end pre-college, or I guess I was in college for this, Dale Murphy. And again, the hat logo, a little bit symmetric, so a little harder to catch, but other things that are giveaways. I'll just show, in the case of these others, what they look like, and I'll indicate the way that I discovered the Buddy Lewis error was I was comparing 1940 cards to 1941 cards in the play ball set. Keep your eyes on Buddy Lewis. Whoa. We'll back it up. Instant replay. Right. And so as I put these side by side, I thought, well, maybe he's a switch hitter, or maybe one of them's wrong. And so I checked it out, and it turned out that, in fact, the 1940 was wrong. The 1941 was correct. And then just for fun, it's my best special effect. You can see Buck Martinez and Dale Murphy correct themselves as well. Okay. Magazine interlude. So I am also a Hank Aaron magazine collector. I'm actually a Hank Aaron everything collector, but I thought at points in the talk, I would just highlight some interesting things about Hank Aaron's appearances on the covers of various magazines. 1957, kind of an opening day-ish sporting news, Hank Aaron appears as part of a heck of an outfield with Ted Williams and Mickey Mantle. So Hank Aaron is the upper right player shown. And then other players, Klaczewski, sleeveless, really jumps out. Whitey Ford, the pitcher, Yogi Berra, the catcher, et cetera. So that April 1957 was about the earliest that you're going to find Hank Aaron on the cover of something. Interestingly, the first time you'll find him by himself on the cover of a magazine is not a baseball magazine. It is this October 1957 issue of American Forests, which literally is all about the timber industry. So perhaps pun intended, right? Because Hank Aaron and his timber had just led the Milwaukee Braves, of course, to the title, and he was the MVP. But a bit of trivia, if you ever found yourself on Jeopardy and the question had to do with Hank Aaron's first magazine cover by himself, American Forests, there you go. Okay, let's go to 1958. And wow, Topps gives us 4 cards of Hank Aaron, and also an unfamiliar face pops up. So we talked a little bit about the Topps and Bowman battle for player contracts. A player who after 1953 was nowhere to be found in either set other than just a little tiny head on some team cards was Stan Musial. He chose not to be with either company, but in 1958, toward the end of the season, he signed with Topps. They were able to put him in the very last series as part of an all-star checklist, or sorry, pardon me, an all-star subset. And interestingly enough, they were so excited to have Stan Musial that they triple printed his card. So they made 3 times as many of the Stan Musial card as that Hank Aaron all-star card, as an example, just to make sure kids really knew, hey, we do have Stan the Man. Stan the Man in every pack, pretty much. So first Topps World Series cards, question mark. First Topps multiplayer cards, question mark. Every time there's a question mark, you know it's wrong. First Topps All-Star cards, question mark. Right. So these are all things that if we just think traditionally about the top sets, and we sort of forget about some of the oddball occurrences that preceded, we might think of these as kind of famous firsts or innovations of the 1958 top set. I will shatter all these myths. 1957, and I'll say this is more mainstream. This is hardly an oddball example, but Topps had a couple of multiplayer cards and very good ones at that the year before. So they might've been kind of testing it out there. But they also had a multiplayer card in 1954. We'll call this an oddball one, but the O'Brien twins shared space. Now, multiplayer cards, even in their 1948 set. So the very first Topps baseball set wasn't 1952. It wasn't even 1951. But in 1948, or I should say cataloged as 1948, but there's some reason to believe it might have been more like 1949, there was something called Topps Magic Photos. And Magic Photos included a lot of things, including non-sports, but I believe there were 18 baseball ones. So Tinker and Evers, will count that as 2 star players on the same card. By the way, these are really tiny. And then Cleveland Indians, 4-3. So we can count that as an early Topps World Series card. That's in fact referencing the Indians World Series against the Braves. So here we go. Topps All-Star cards, 1951. They had those team cards that I showed. Some of you also are thinking of Topps Bluebacks and Redbacks as probably the most famous 1951 Topps offerings. And Topps is putting out a reboot of 1951 as we speak. They're on the second of 4 waves of that. But 1951, they had 2 terrific sets. One of them called Connie Mack All-Stars, where Connie Mack, who had wrapped up something like 50 years as the manager of the Athletics, evidently helped choose the greatest players at each position. And so you got guys like Lou Gehrig in that set. But they also put out in an identical style what's known now as Topps Current All-Stars. So you have the 1951 Connie Mack All-Stars and the 1951 Current All-Stars. And so you see Larry Doby, Robin Roberts. By the way, the Robin Roberts is extremely rare. If you happen to have 2 or 3 sitting around and you want to send me one, I would not say no. But yeah, so we could call these the first all-star cards, at least in indicating all-star. So I love this graphic. This came from George Bennett. Some of you follow his Carpet O Cards offerings on the SABR Baseball Cards Twitter site. At any rate, he made a data display, a bar graph, histogram, call it what you will, of Hank Aaron in the various Topps sets. And you can see Hank Aaron progressing from one card in each set, 54 through 57, to 4 cards, right, which we just showed. And then you can see that it literally goes off the charts in 1974 with all these extras toward the end. But you can see this is not only a trend in Hank Aaron, right? That as Hank Aaron's career progressed, the number of different cards he has progressed. But this would be true for a lot of the stars of the era, that there were just certain years where they put out a lot of different subsets or other things, especially league leaders. But at any rate, I like that graphic. Let's go to 1959. We get the first true Topps highlights or record breakers subset. For those of you who collected as kids in the late 80s, or pardon me, late 70s and early and mid 80s, like I did, we thought of record breakers as just a fixture in every set. But this Baseball Thrills, Hank Aaron, in a way, it could be considered the first Topps highlights or record breakers set. There are some other cool cards in that set. However, I would indicate 1954, Topps put out mostly a non-sport issue called Topps Scoop, but it did have 4 baseball cards. One of them, in fact, welcoming the Braves to Milwaukee in March of 1953. Another one involved Babe Ruth hitting 60 home runs. That's a little more famous. Another had Bob Feller, I think, striking out 18 in a game. So a non-baseball set, but nonetheless with some baseball highlights in it. And then the rest tended to be just highlights in American history. Okay, a splendid challenge to the monopoly. I haven't shown it, but 1959, some of you know, is the year that Fleer came out with an entire 80-card set dedicated to Ted Williams. So Fleer, who had previously produced baseball cards, or at least advertised on the back of some baseball cards in 1923, I believe. Oh, it might be 28, 23 or 28, a long time ago. We'll say it that way. Fleer jumped in and joined the party and would stick around actually a few years doing different things. It was Ted Williams in 59. And as a result, there was no Ted Williams in the top set. It was exclusive with the Splinter. Also, the origin of rated rookies. So I've got a Ron Fairley here, but there were a number of players done in this style. And that was the first time that Topps really singled out rookies that were expected to go somewhere. In the case of Ron Fairley, I'd say they did all right. Okay. We will move on. A magazine interlude. I get to show 2 of my favorite magazines in my collection. One is just, to me, it's like a work of art. You could hang the June 18th, 1959 jet in a museum. It's a simple design, but I just love it. So, and the picture is a little bit reminiscent of Hank Aaron's 1957 Topps card, only not flipped. Another one that I just absolutely love is a baseball preview issue from 59 with Hank Aaron and Stan Musial. Hank Aaron was a big fan of Stan Musial. Stan Musial was always supportive of young Hank in his career. And I just think it's a beautiful image, and the uniforms and everything. It's what's not to like. Also, Jet Magazine, a couple months before the red issue, talking about the black players expected to be factors in pennant races, and really an all-star cast of players shown there, Hank Aaron to the far right. Okay, 1960, for Topps and innovation, 2 players, or pardon me, 2 photos on the base card. So that first card, you see the kind of the black and white over the yellow background, and then you see the more traditional portrait. In some cases, or at least one case, I should say, Topps actually recycled the same photo for both. So that was a little bit lazy. I think it was a Reds pitcher, if I'm remembering right. But also an all-star set with kind of a cool design. For a lot of collectors I know consider the 1960 all-star set one of their favorites ever from Topps, or maybe in the top 2 or 3. And then I'm excited. My biggest pickup of 2021, price-wise, I suppose. It was good. I got it a week and a half ago instead of shopping for it today. But at any rate, 1960 Lake to Lake Dairy. I would say a hallmark of the mid and late 50s and early 60s and even beyond were regional food issues. That's probably not at all an area of my expertise, but I'll just indicate that these cards came stapled to milk cartons. So you can see with that last card, there's a bit of a staple rip from ripping it off the milk carton. And then you could get redemptions from things like this, but the company was nice enough to send it back to you only hole punched. So my card has some character, but it turns out if you were to look for these cards at a card show or on eBay, you'd find almost everyone you found had the staple rip, and maybe half of them have the hole punch. Also in 1960, competition from two sides. Fleer was back, and this time they had essentially an all-time greats or baseball greats set that they put out. But Leaf, who had last shown up in 1949 before Topps really got into the scene, Leaf came back. And Leaf put out, I'll call it sort of a very small, almost half set of black and white. But actually the set I like quite a bit. No Hank Aaron in either of those two sets. 1961, this is where Topps introduces league leaders, and they would go on to do that for many, 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 many years. But they also put out an MVP subset, which they did at least one more time in 1975 during kind of my collecting knowledge. If they've done it in the last 20 years, I wouldn't know anything about that. But at any rate, so Hank Aaron, of course, featured in the league leaders, the MVP subset, since he won in 57, the All-Star subset, and this is another one that sometimes people point to as their favorite, and of course, just his base card, which is another one I really like. So I think Topps went 4 for 4 here. 1962, we get wood grain borders. Those of you who are around my age collected a lot of wood grain borders in 1987. Also, do we get the first retired player career retrospective with Babe Ruth? I always thought it was a little bit of a knock that Topps chose to honor Babe Ruth with a good 12 cards or so in the 1962 set, the very same year that Roger Maris was, at least in baseball cards, the new single season home run king. It seemed to be saying, okay, Roger, don't let your head get too big. Babe Ruth is still the guy. But at any rate, Hank Aaron has a beautiful card. I think aesthetically, probably his nicest Topps card ever is his 1962 base. He's also got the All-Star, and I'll just show the 1987 Topps with Dale Murphy. I believe in 1987, I've never read anything official, but it makes sense certainly, that 1987 Topps was in fact paying tribute to their set 25 years earlier. And of course, that's an anniversary sort of year. So these days, Topps would blast, 25th anniversary all over it. But back then in 87, a little more subtle. But first retired player retrospective, well, not so fast. It depends if you count this or not. In 1948, Swell Bubblegum put out the Babe Ruth story. Now, Babe Ruth is shown on the first card, but he's not shown in most of the cards. Almost all the cards in the set feature William Bendix, who played him in the Babe Ruth story movie. Nonetheless, it's possible to take that set, read all the card backs, and get a pretty decent career retrospective of the Babe. So you might count that, you might not. And if not, I think the 1962 Topps set with the Babe Ruth subset may well qualify. Magazine interlude. Here is Hank on the cover of Sport Magazine. And we will say, in terms of the most prominent sports publications at the time in magazine format, this was Hank's first real cover. I had to qualify that a bunch of ways, right? He was on Forests, but we won't call that a sports magazine. He was in Jet, but we won't think of that as primarily a sports magazine. But he was also in a 1958 issue of Sport Magazine, but you can see how there's the big Hank Aaron and then there's three little guys along the side. He was one of the little guys along the side in 1958 with Bob Turley as the featured cover image. So 62, I would call it his first real Sport Magazine cover. Okay, and there he is. He's the second little guy in the Bob Turley issue. Okay, go to 1963. All right, I say have a cookie. Why is that? Well, Fleer is back now, and this time it's not an all-time great set. It's actually a set of current players, so they're really challenging the Topps monopoly. The way to get around putting baseball pictures with gum is to put them with cookies. So I have friends, the oldest piece of gum I ever saw a friend eat was, I know Bill Perch is in the audience. We watched our friend Rich open, I believe it was a pack of 1973 Topps, believe it or not, just last year or so. And then a buddy of ours who was over actually ate the gum. So, which at that time was almost 50 years old. I don't know that anybody would dare if they opened a pack of 1963 Fleer, try a 50, or in this case, almost 60-year-old cookie. That I would not like to see. Now, I will acknowledge the Hank Aaron here, beautiful picture. This is a custom card that somebody designed. Hank Aaron was not in the set. Good news for my wallet, but bad news for my collection. Hank Aaron, though, was featured not only with his base card by Topps, but also one of my very favorite cards he's ever been on, shared with Ernie Banks, Power Plus. 1963 Topps paired a number of superstars together, and in some cases, 3 or 4. 3 absolute highlights of the set for me are this one, of course, Stan Musial with Willie Mays. How do you beat that? And then as a Dodger fan, Gil Hodges and Duke Snider. Yeah, with Gil on the Mets. So, right. Now, again, is this a Topps throwback? Take a look. We've got the 1963 Hank Aaron, and then we've got the card that my friends and I, when we'd open it in 1983, would say, Boggs! And then, sweet! And then, just kidding, Tommy. But anyways, point is, you can see the similarity in design between the 63 Topps and the 83 Topps, and again, 20 being kind of an anniversary year. Good chance Topps was paying some tribute in 83 to the 63 set. Okay, 64, fantastic year to be a Hank Aaron collector. You get the really big cards, Topps Giants. You've got a really nice base card of Hank Aaron. Now you've paired him with Willie Mays, which that would be impossible to beat, I think, right? If you could somehow throw Clemente in there, you would have the greatest card of all time. And of course, there is a league leader card with all 3, but a beautiful picture like this, I don't think you could ever beat. And then I say, how about this Topps stand-up? Is this the first die cut? Look at that. You can kind of fold it over and Hank Aaron stands up and the yellow background kind of turns into a stand. Very clever design. Well, let's see. Oh gosh, die cuts do go back a ways. 1934 to 1936. You've got some really interesting ones that are kind of like monochrome tinted. Those 1951 Connie Mack and current All-Stars that I showed were also die cuts. And in fact, I think you'll see them more commonly, folded over, cut out, etc., not intact. But in fact, the first die cuts appear to date all the way to 1887. And since I'm from Chicago SABR, I'm curious if anybody in my audience recognizes who that player is. I don't believe his uniform would say Chicago. I believe it would say St. Louis for the Browns. Since I'm not skilled enough to man the slideshow and the chat at the same time, I won't know if any of you got it. I'll just say congratulations if you guessed Charles Comiskey. All right, so die cuts go way back. All righty. This is a fun one, cardboard clairvoyance. So something from 1964. Now, careful if you're putting these in little displays or whatever. These things are big. These aren't baseball card size. But 1964, a game came out called Challenge the Yankees. And Hank Aaron was in that. A number of other good players are in that. I think a lot of Yankees were in that, but to be challenged, not to actually challenge the Yankees themselves, since they were Yankees. Nonetheless, check this out. This is crazy. The first 11 years of Hank Aaron's career, 1954 to 1964, 9 out of 11, all those dates in red, the Yankees won the pennant, right? Well, here comes Hank Aaron to challenge the Yankees, and now look at the next 12 years. The Yankees go on an 11-year pennant drought, not to win the pennant again until Hank Aaron hangs up his spikes. So look at that. We know about the curse of the Bambino. This is the curse of the hammer. Hank Aaron challenged the Yankees in 1964, and they were garbage for more than a decade. All right. I put the small r in SABR research. Okay, 1965. Nostalgic for 1960 already. So again, we've seen sets that seem to pay tribute to earlier sets. We saw Topps do that in 87 and 83, going back 25 and 20 years. This was an interesting one. Here's the 1965 Topps Hank Aaron, probably one of the most popular, I think the most popular design among collectors of the 1960s. Interestingly, next to it, Chuck Dressen isn't from that same set. That's Chuck Dressen's manager card from 1960 Topps. So 1960 Topps, the managers all had this kind of interesting design with the wavy pennant. I think it's fair to say that the 1965 designers maybe liked some elements and brought it back, at any rate. 1965, this is just a little bit of an inside joke among collectors my age or older, where you open a new pack and you need sunglasses because it's too bright and you're like, geez, what's with all the shiny stuff? And this is just a reminder that Topps was doing shiny way back in 1965 with their embossed cards. So this is kind of a gold shiny Hank Aaron. Okay, 1966, I say hats off to the next chapter for the Braves because they moved to Atlanta, right? And one of the things that was interesting, and some of you who know the Topps cards of the 60s know that Topps loved to take pictures of guys without hats or kind of up nostril where you couldn't see the hat emblem, right? Just in case the guy ended up on a different team, right? Okay, well, anyways, so here they are, essentially the first half of the 1966 Topps set. All of the Braves either have no hats, or at some point, I think you get a guy profile where you can't see what's on his hat. And then Eddie Matthews, you get a really horrible airbrushing job covering up the emblem on the hat. But they waited until card 500 for Hank Aaron and got to show him legitimately in his Atlanta Braves hat. That was a nice thing, by the way. Topps from 1952 through 1973 issued their cards in different series or different releases through the year. What it meant was you didn't have to have every card ready day one. So they were able to kind of wait on Hank Aaron. Bad news for collectors who liked Hank Aaron was they were going months and months without getting Hank Aaron in their packs. When they finally got him, though, it's probably for most of you, you'd say a nicer looking card than, well, let's see, Joe Torre is Fred Flintstone, Phil Necro. Anyways, I don't know. Some guys like the no hats. I like the hats. All right. 1967, Topps meets a challenge to the monopoly, but I don't think they worry too much about it. I don't even know if they know about it. It's all the way in Venezuela. So we have Hank Aaron's 1967 Topps card. I heard from one of you in the pregame that that's a favorite. It's a favorite of mine as well. I just love it. You'll see the same image used on a set that tends to be cataloged or slabbed as Venezuela Topps or Venezuelan Topps or Topps Venezuelan. The research and consensus seems to be that the set wasn't produced by Topps, but was in fact pirated from Topps. So at any rate, but Venezuela, Topps had been releasing cards in Venezuela on and off since 1959. This particular set, though, doesn't appear to have been sanctioned by Topps or produced with Topps, but rather put out by a publication called Sport Grafico independently. Now, that's not definitive, but I'd say that's probably where the consensus of people who've studied these cards is. Collecting got complicated. I've got a couple things. This Hank Aaron, where he's holding a bat, is pretty big and pretty thin. Good luck putting it in a top loader without destroying it. I managed to put it in, and now I'm scared to ever take it out again. But at any rate, there's that. Then there's this other thing where Hank Aaron's the team captain of some folks. But the point is, test issues, extras, these things were starting to get big. We're not so much totally entering, like you saw the embossed card from 65, the die cut top stand-up from 64, but we're really getting into a period where almost every year it seems like there's a lot of extra sets, some of them test issues and very hard to find. And so if you're the kind of collector that says, I want all of Hank Aaron's cards, these are years that will drive you absolutely crazy. And in some cases, you'll just say, never mind, I guess I don't want all those cards. Okay. 68, lots of stuff. These stickers can be tough, by the way. But take a good look at his 1968 Topps flagship picture. There are going to be pictures we see again. In fact, the little playing card with single seems to use the same photo as the All-Star card right beneath it. The base card will make a comeback pretty soon. And in fact, so will the bottom left sticker version of Hank Aaron from the triple sticker. So let's take a look. We go to 69 and oh, what happened there? Mark Armour has one of the most read articles on the SABR Baseball Cards blog on the Topps player boycott. And Topps, the only way they were going to be able to put out a good set in 69 was to recycle a ton of photos. And so Hank Aaron was one of them. Luckily, in my book, it's one of his nicest photos. I mentioned from the triple panel of stickers, a photo would get reused. This is a Topps test issue that I do have, but it was not easy. 1969 Topps Supers. It's a set that Topps essentially put out again in 70 and 71, only big. This card here is actually a tiny bit smaller than a standard card. 69 is also notable. It was the very first year that Hank Aaron wasn't a Topps All-Star. So Topps didn't put out All-Star cards every single year. They skipped years, but at any rate, there were only 2 years out of the 23 years that Topps put out Hank Aaron baseball cards. There were only 2 years, 1969 and 1976, where Hank Aaron was not one of their All-Stars. Now, in 1976, it makes sense. He batted like 220 and, very limited action, end of his career, no longer a superstar other than in reputation, character, dignity, and class. But 1969, what makes this particularly oddball is 1969, he started the All-Star game. And you say, well, okay, Jason, but they're probably looking at the year before. Well, 1968, he started the All-Star game also. So I have no good reason why Hank Aaron didn't get the All-Star card. Again, good news for my wallet, bad news for my collection. All right. Magazine interlude. Finally, Hank Aaron on the cover of Sports Illustrated. This is literally his first cover, 1969, believe it or not. And you might say, well, small market, Milwaukee. There were literally 9 Milwaukee Braves who made the cover of Sports Illustrated before Hank Aaron. And in fact, many of you magazine historians know the very first issue of Sports Illustrated featured Eddie Matthews. So Sports Illustrated has some splaining to do. How'd you leave off the hammer for that long? But okay, so that's his first. 1970, my co-chair Nick, who knows a lot about photography and printing and things that I know almost nothing about when it comes to cards, let me know 1970 really saw the rise of 35 millimeter Candids. And so you can see Hank Aaron here. He's not so much posing for the Topps photographer as maybe even annoyed, like, did you just take a picture of me? Really? And I think Topps had a ways to go to really get the lighting and other things figured out. But anyways, there you go. 1971, a few things. Basically the decline of stats. So interestingly, that the very first year of SABR was the year that Topps pulled all the stats off the back of the baseball cards, right? Sort of an anti-SABR movement within Topps. And they went back to what they used to do in 1952, 53, 54, et cetera, in just giving you the most current season, plus the lifetime totals. I will note that they showed stolen bases, which when I was a kid buying cards in 78, 79, 80, I didn't get stolen bases. So at least there's that. I show the Topps and O-Pee-Chee back because for the first year, Topps and O-Pee-Chee had demonstrably different backs. Normally, yeah, you had some French translation and the writing was a little smaller, but the design was the same. This particular year, you got different design on the backs, and so that's kind of neat. I know a lot of collectors who don't bother to collect all the O-Pee-Chee, but for 1971, they make that exception because it feels different enough. We'll see in 1974, same thing, that there's good reason to collect O-Pee-Chee, even if you normally don't. So best and worst of in-game action photos. The Thurman Munson is on a lot of Mount Rushmores for one of the best Topps cards ever. That is a remarkable card for their first year doing in-game action photos. Now, as soon as I say that, I'm about to show you it's not really their first year, but the first year generally thought of. Then again, my gosh, that Brooks Robinson card, right? It's a cult classic because it's so bad. But there we go. B. Robinson commits robbery. I think the greater crime may have occurred at Topps. Okay, game action, though, we already saw, 1956 Hank Aaron, that there's Hank Aaron, nope, well, Willie Mays sliding into home, but it did come from a real game, right? It wasn't just an artist's imagination, it was a real game. 1959, also, Topps had their Baseball Thrills series, and this, of course, people recognize as Willie Mays, something he did in the real game, not just posing or an artist's imagination. But what about genuine photographs? 1961, I think, was really where Topps got their start on in-game action. And it was, in all places, their checklists. Each checklist in 1961 had a color action photo on the front, and on the back, a little black and white in-game action photo. 1960. So again, this is a little bit kind of artsy and not quite a true photograph. You see Luis swipes base. That's from the 1960 World Series subset. And that is true game action. If you were at the game, you'd say, oh yeah, I remember that. But notable here is the Dodger hoping to make the tag. And some of you maybe recognize that as Maury Wills. In the history of Topps, Maury Wills is kind of a standout. When the Topps scouts or whoever the folks were went to camp and were told pretty much sign up anybody who even has a tiny chance to make the majors, they saw Maury Wills and they said, well, no need to waste $3 or $5 or $1 on this guy. He's got no chance. Well, he remembered that. So when he made the majors, he didn't want to be on any Topps cards. They got away with this one, maybe because it didn't say Maury Wills on the front or something. But at any rate, he doesn't make his actual Topps debut until the 1967 set. So a little bit of history there. That was a snub that if you're a Maury Wills collector, you've got some big gaps in your collection. He did make the 1963 Fleer set that I mentioned. So that's sometimes thought of as a rookie, but he's also in 1962 Post or Jello or some of the food issues. But also in game action, remember 1948 or 49, Topps Magic Photos, we have in-game action from the World Series. You can barely see what's going on there. Somebody's sliding into home, but okay. But in-game action, in fact, dates all the way back to 1912, right? These are action photos, and the one I've shown is a really notable one. I think it was called something like Devlin Too Late or Devlin Not on Time, or something like that, right? Referring to Devlin. But it was only in the past maybe 3 years or so that the player sliding was identified fairly definitively as Shoeless Joe Jackson. Well, you can imagine this card that you might have found in bad shape for $60 is now more like $2,000, right? So there you go. Anyways, but that set I would say is popularly recognized as featuring the first in-game action photos. Some of you know the very famous Charles Conlon photo of Ty Cobb sliding into third. That even made it into the middle panel of one of those. Okay, 72, we're nearing the end of the Hammer's career. A little Princess Bride reference. You keep using that word action. I do not think it means what you think it means, right? I mean, there's Bob Robertson. I don't know that that's anybody's, idea of exciting game action. But really, it just meant that the photos were taken during the game of actual things happening during the game. It didn't necessarily mean you're going to get a diving catch or anything like that. So anyways, sure enough, the Hank Aaron in action seems to be in his home run trot. Not the most exciting action photo of Hank Aaron, but there you go. And again, some test issues, including kind of a cloth sticker and a candy lid sort of thing. 1973, it's a little bit of a joke here, but I say, is this the first chase card? Chase cards today mean something else in the hobby. Some would argue that chase cards go all the way back to Hannes Wagner, I should say, in the T206 set. But nonetheless, I'm using it a different way. Here is Topps getting excited about the home run chase. Here are two players, Hank Aaron and Willie Mays, that maybe, well, especially Hank Aaron, but maybe could pass the babe, right? So Topps not only made that card with Ruth, Aaron, and Mays card number 1 in the set, but in fact had a whole subset with the all-time leaders for different categories, like wins with Cy Young, strikeouts with Walter Johnson, etc. And total bases, where Hank Aaron already had the record. Now, when we get to 1974, they got really excited. So people know, collectors know that this 1974 Hank Aaron new all-time home run king was issued. You could get it in a pack while Hank Aaron still was sitting on 713 home runs. So we'll call it cardboard clairvoyance, but we'll also say that Topps really, the odds they would have gotten in Vegas wouldn't have been very long shot on that. But they took a chance. They said, we think he's going to break the record. And so they not only created that new all-time home run king card in advance of tying and breaking the record, but also issued these Hank Aaron specials. And you can see here little miniature version of each of Hank Aaron's Topps base cards, going back from his rookie card all the way back to the preceding year, 1973. Some other neat things. So Hank Aaron in the Topps set didn't just have these cards and a team card and a team autograph card and some other places you might spot him, but he also shared an all-star card with Dick Allen. So for the Dick Allen / Hank Aaron fans out there, cards don't get much cooler than that. I count myself among that number. You might ask, is this the first time that All-Stars, though, had to share real estate? And then I'll also acknowledge this is yet another year where even if you don't normally collect O-Pee-Chee, if you're a Hank Aaron collector, you probably should collect O-Pee-Chee. So let's see. O-Pee-Chee look at this. Instead of Hank Aaron specials with 4 little minis, they had a bunch in the middle that had 2 minis. So these are distinctly different from the top set, these O-Pee-Chee cards, and they're called collector's souvenir cards. But at any rate, I never knew why that was. Why did they just put 2 instead of 4? And by the way, sometimes they did put 4. So I will say this too, I will lay a claim to the 1974 O-Pee-Chee cards 1 through 9 being the coolest first page of a complete set binder in the history of baseball cards. That is pretty darn good. That's a lot of Hank Aaron for cards 1 through 9 in the set. So I never really understood why they did 4 sometimes and why they did 2. And then fellow collector Matthew Glidden actually has a blog post on this where the sort of stat back Hank Aaron specials had no need for French translation. So you just didn't have to do anything special. But the sort of bio back with lots of text, when you translate it into French, you didn't have room. So you basically had to split into 2 cards. So that's the story. He helped me crack the code, or well, he cracked the code and I read his blog. So other things we brought up, All-Stars sharing real estate. It was a first for Topps, except for managers. So you can see Fred Haney and Casey Stengel sharing a card in the 1958 set. I think I mentioned with the Hank Aaron specials, right? You had cards on cards, right? You had cards with baseball cards on them. Is that weird? Kind of self-referential or meta? Well, also in 1974, Fleer put out a set, Baseball First, including the first baseball card. Now, it wasn't really the first baseball card. In fact, it's not even a baseball card that exists, but it features sort of an imagined baseball card of Kid Madden, same year. So which one was first? I don't know. 1973 Topps, Jack Hyatt on the right-hand side. The back cartoon, Jack collects baseball cards, and you have a bunch of little tiny rectangles. And if you want to count those as cards, that would be an even earlier appearance of cards on cards. But you can go back one more year, Carl Yastrzemski in action, and this is true of some other in-action cards in the set. And the back advertises cards from that very Topps set, and shows some crude drawings of what 1972 Topps cards might look like. Now, none of them correspond to actual cards in the set, so are they cards on cards? That's a little bit hard to say. I thought the one thing that was funny, because maybe they didn't know about Hank Aaron takes on the Yankees and the curse of the hammer, but they indicate here 1971 World Series and playoff game cards, and they show a guy on the Yankees. Well, the Yankees didn't even make the playoffs or World Series in 1971. Hank Aaron saw to that. Not that he made it either, but the curse of the hammer, of course. Now, interestingly, 1906, if you want to know about cards of cards, a German manufacturer, also the cards were distributed in, I believe, France and Italy, and in different languages on the back. And I think the one I'm showing here is French, now that I think about it. They actually had a set of 6 cards that not only were cards of cards, but the 6 cards sequentially walk through the lithography process and the cutting and all these things. It was the 6 stages of how these very cards were made. So I think the earliest cards of cards were that European set from 1906. Not baseball, but anyways. Okay, magazine interlude, some iconic covers. The Sports Illustrated, I think everybody is familiar with. One of my favorites is the one on the end. It's a little bit harder to find, but there was a magazine, Black Sports magazine, that had, I believe, 3 Henry Aaron covers in the early 70s. This one, I just love the art, but also even the caption, "Will White America Accept This Black Hero?" I think was an interesting one. You know, as we think about Hank Aaron and his desire to be considered for manager jobs and other things, I think we could see at that time, and maybe present day, depending who you talk to, that he was accepted for certain things, but not accepted in other ways. The magazine also features an article written by Cool Papa Bell, who was assigned by Black Sports Magazine to cover the chase. And so it's Cool Papa Bell chasing Hank Aaron around in the very beginning of the 1974 season. So that's a pretty cool article in there. 1975. Oh, I'm going to lose my voice if I don't. That's okay. We're almost at the last year. More cards of cards. This little MVP subset. All-Star base cards. So this is a bizarre thing in the history of Topps. Topps made Hank Aaron an All-Star in the 1975 set, but they put the All-Star on his highlights card. Well, that's weird. If you looked, for instance, at a 1975 Topps Steve Garvey, it would be on the base card of Steve Garvey, but Hank Aaron, they put it here. But at any rate, it was the first year where Topps turned base cards into all-stars, but Hank being the exception. Highlights and record breakers, as a subset that you'll see over and over and over for several years, makes its debut. Although I showed already something like 1959 Baseball Thrills, the Topps did feature certain highlights earlier in their history. Hank gets the airbrush treatment. I don't want to suggest these are an exact match, but you can see this 1975 Topps card of Hank Aaron on the Brewers, which a lot of collectors consider Hank Aaron's least attractive card. Okay. Must have been taken pretty close to when his all-star card with Dick Allen was taken. The angle of the head isn't exactly the same, but you get the sense that that it was probably taken right around then, and then just had the cap and uniform colored in. Parallels today, that's a common thing for modern collectors, the idea that here's the normal set, here's the one with the red borders, here's the one with the green borders, here's the one with the whatever, right? Parallels are kind of all over the place with Topps these days. 1975 Topps Minis is an example of maybe the first Topps parallel release, putting out miniature versions of their set. Somebody could say, well, wouldn't you count O-Pee-Chee as a parallel set? I probably wouldn't, but somebody could. But you also have SSPC putting out a Hank Aaron card along with some other cards, and SSPC was really an incarnation of TCMA, maybe a more familiar name to collectors. So yet another challenge of the monopoly met with lawsuit. All right. So that 1975 Topps Hank Aaron features some pretty bad airbrushing. Topps has a nice history of that. I've got some of the worst of Topps airbrushing. But something a lot of people maybe don't think about is that it goes back, at least with Topps, all the way to 1951. So you can see Gus Erniel, and he was with the White Sox, but then he was traded to the A's. Topps, no worry. We know what to do there. I don't know if it was literal airbrush versus marker versus paint versus anything else. I don't know their true technology, but the point is the idea of manipulating the player image to reflect a new team was nothing new. Okay, we finally get to the end of Hank Aaron's Topps run, 1976. Something nice was that same year, Laughlin, who had done some sets independently and some with Fleer, put out his own set of Indianapolis Clowns. And so fortuitously, we get a Negro Leagues card of Hank Aaron in 1976. Also the all-time All-Stars. And one could argue that Hank Aaron himself could have been in this set. It's an interesting set. There was certainly nobody active in the set. The most recent player selected for that set by the Sporting News, or I should say selected as an all-time all-star by the Sporting News and then put in the set by Topps, was Ted Williams. It was almost entirely guys from about 1900 to 1930-ish. But one could ask the question whether Hank Aaron had earned the right to be considered one of the three greatest outfielders ever by that time. Of course, some people would say even today that he's not. I would say he is. 1976, nice looking card, showing his age a little bit, and of course becoming the all-time RBI leader. If you flip the card over, you'll see that he beat Babe Ruth's record, but if you sort of followed the developments with Albert Pujols more recently, you might find that if Topps were to issue that card again, Babe Ruth would lose a whole bunch of RBIs, and maybe he broke somebody else's record instead. I'd have to look into that. We get to 1977, and I'm just going to grab a Twitter post from Michael Ellingson, I think the day that Hank Aaron passed away, where Michael designed a career capper. This is what Hank Aaron's card would have looked like, maybe if Topps did one in 77. Michael's been doing some nice ones of these and post them, but this highlights yet another thing in kind of the history of Topps baseball cards. It wasn't a common thing to do the so-called career capper. It wasn't a common thing to put out a card and show his complete career statistics. It was the common thing to put out the top set featuring players expected to be active and prominent in that current season. So because Hank Aaron had retired, Topps knew he wasn't going to play in 77. He doesn't need a card in 77. I think they've changed their tune now, right? If you had somebody with a career this lofty, they'd find a way to keep putting out cards, and eventually you would see the career statistics. But in the case of Hank Aaron, if we were to look at his final Topps card from 76, it would show 745 career home runs. So good job, Michael, on that. You've added something. And then just this morning, I love this so much, not just for the card. So again, this is a custom one. This is a card that does not exist. But my friend Scott Hodges, who says Hank Aaron's only real total that he should be remembered for is his total influence on the world around him and how many hearts and souls he won for a cause much greater than baseball. And that will never be topped, right? So just a beautiful card and a beautiful sentiment. So I thought I'd kind of close there and then just say to all of you, and I'm happy to stick around for questions, by the way, but I want to say thank you. I want to say follow SABR Cards, SABR Baseball Cards for short, on Twitter. Binge read the SABR Baseball Cards blog. We only have 600 articles, or even better, if you're a SABR member, write for us. And if you're not a SABR member, join and then write for us. If you sat through this much of my talk, you're qualified. You could even do a whole post on stuff Jason got wrong at his talk. Collect Hank Aaron. Just don't outbid me. And then, not to be too cheesy, but I think while none of us can ever hope to truly emulate the man, we can all honor the hammer in the way we live our lives. So with that, I'll take any questions anybody has. And I think probably the cleanest way to do it would be to just turn off your mic, start talking. And if somebody else is talking, then maybe pause and try again later. All right. Any questions for me? And I've got some stuff in the chat that I can kind of try to sift through. But yeah, if anybody wants to ask a question on live audio, I'll take it.
Hi, Jason.
Yes.
Mike Hirsch. Thank you very much for a very nice presentation. I learned a great deal, and I've been a lifelong collector. I have a question about Topps in general. Topps appears to have been a very progressive organization in terms of issuing cards of Black players along with the white players. Mm-hmm. Did the company ever have any blowback back in the 50s and over that situation? Or did they ever have any fears or misgivings about issuing cards of Black players?
Man, Michael, that is a fantastic question. I don't know the answer specifically. What I will say, though, is this. 1953, Topps actually let off the set 1, 2, and 3, cards 1, 2, and 3, all Black players, which, when I first saw that, I thought, oh, cool. That I maybe wouldn't have guessed that. I don't know if there was blowback. I mean, their primary market at that time, right? If we think who buys Topps cards today, oh gosh, it's probably people my age, right? But if we think who was buying Topps cards in the 1950s, there's probably a lot of 7 and 8 and 9-year-old and 10-year-old kids, right? Which maybe wouldn't have quite had the same prejudices as older populations. But I don't specifically know the answer. If anybody on the in the audience knows anything about that, maybe type it in the chat, and I'd be interested to see. Yeah, thank you, Michael. Thank you. Okay, other questions, and if not, I'll also go through the chat a little bit.
Jason?
Yes, Don.
I've always wondered why Musial took so long to come over to Topps, especially after Bowman went out of business. Do you have any insight on that?
I have to imagine that it was money. I don't think it was something like principle. We know that Stan Musial was in the early, not all, but in several early Bowman sets. We know also 1954, he was in the Red Heart dog food set, right? He had some cards, I think it was maybe with Rawlings or one of the glove or equipment manufacturers. I have a feeling that where Topps seemed to pay a premium to get Ted Williams back in 1954, maybe they weren't quite willing to go as high as Musial would have wanted. I mean, certainly his status in the game would have commanded a premium, and if they just held the line, I mean, that'd be my guess, is probably money. But I don't know. And again, I'll say, because there's a lot of knowledge in this audience, if anybody has concrete information, definitely type it in.
That answer makes sense, though.
Yeah. Okay. I see a question from Maxwell. Is Hank Aaron signing a baseball on his 1970 Topps card? I think that would have been the first Topps card to show a player signing an autograph. That is a good question. And I actually don't know the answer to either half of it. What I will say is there is another Topps test issue called 1974 Decal Edge. And on that card, Hank Aaron is definitely signing for fans. I don't, off the top of my head, know of cards prior to that that explicitly were showing autographs being signed, but I would definitely have to do research. I don't know the answer. Again, if anybody here has it, and if not, that is a super SABR Baseball Cards blog post waiting to happen. The history of showing players autographing cards. Andrew Ehrenstein, whose dad was the founder of TCMA, also the inaugural winner of our Jefferson Burdick Award from our Baseball Cards Research Committee, indicates he was happy to see the 1975 SSPC Hank Aaron. And Andrew, even if I didn't think you were coming to the talk, that would always make it in. So yeah, and then Mike says, yeah, it looks like he's signing a ball on the 1970 card. I'm gonna back. I have sort of a picture in my head. Shoot, it's a little hard. It's a little hard for me to tell if he's just holding it in a weird way or if he's got a pen. It's a little hard for me to tell. But my eyes are not good. Okay. And then Maxwell notices Manny Sanguillen signing on the 1971 Topps. So that's a really good one too. Are you sharing your screen? Oh, I wish I saw this an hour ago. I was sharing my screen. I believe most people saw it. If not, that would have been a really bizarre presentation I just gave for, oh, never mind, got it. Okay, good. Yes, Jim notes 1969 Topps of Aurelio Rodriguez is really the bat boy. Yes. So it's funny when you have cards that depict the wrong player, sometimes it's just another person on the team that maybe looked a little bit alike or something like that. But sometimes it's not even another player on the team. So in the case of Rodriguez, it's the bat boy. Some of you know also Gary Pettis, 1985 Topps. It's his younger brother who was in high school at the time. So let's see. Okay, so more on Rodriguez. Yes, okay, Ryan's corrected me on the Ken Hubbs that the plane crash was 2 years before the 1966 Ellsworth. I think I said 3 or 4, just kind of going improv. Jim Gantner with the reverse, yes. Okay, Kurt Bavacqua had 81 Fleer reversed. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking maybe even 82 Tim Flannery Fleer, but I could be wrong on that. Claude Osteen, Maxwell knows all. Maxwell's going to do the sequel to this talk. But anyways, yeah, Maxwell notes that it was Claude Osteen, 1960 Topps, who recycled the same picture for both photos on the front of the card. Come on, Topps. Great color on the base card. 87, popular today with collectors, especially autographs. Definitely. I know people trying to collect that set. And it's a tough set. Of course, some of the players have already passed away, which is, that's, they may have signed some cards, of course, earlier, but it certainly puts a premium. But there's one player, I think maybe Ricky Wright, who refuses to sign his 87 Topps card just because. And so he'll sign anything but that. Some of you have heard stories with Steve Garvey not signing his 82 Fleer card, right? So anyways, John Goodman, Babe Ruth movie, pretty bad too. Yeah, Babe Ruth is waiting for a great movie. Maybe Jane Levy can help with that, but Babe Ruth really needs a great movie. He has no shortage of bad movies. Bill Perch lets us know that our buddy Aram did eat the gum from 1973, and he's still alive and well. If I ever get an unopened pack of 63 Fleer, though, we're going to bring him over and have him try the cookie. All right. Most people know first SI cover, Eddie Matthews. Sorry, some of you have probably seen all this. Okay, I'm seeing some good guesses on Comiskey, how tall Hank Aaron is, standing next to Mickey Mantles on that World Series card from '58. Okay, Michael doesn't like the visual of one of the phrases I used. Understandable. Okay, let me see. Okay. I'll tell you what, let me see. Oh, did any of the other All-Stars in the 1975 set change teams? Maybe that's why they put the All-Star on the card of Aaron in an Atlanta uniform instead of the Brewers card. So very good, very good. I often wondered, why would they put the All-Star star on the Hank Aaron highlights card and not his base card? Well, his base card's on the Brewers, and of course he was an NL All-Star. So I think that's a perfectly good theory. I believe that same year, Bobby Mercer had a little bit of funny business in that by the time he moved to the team they showed him on in the set, his All-Star was with the wrong league. But in his case, they didn't have two different cards to choose from. They only had one. So I can't remember now if it's an AL team that says NL All-Star or an NL team that says AL All-Star. But yeah, I think RJ, you're exactly right on the Hank Aaron. It does make for a really cool card. Oh yeah, Bobby Mercer, Maxwell with the answer. Mark Hoyle notes, Andrew, SSPC, best set of the 1970s. Okay. Let's see. And some folks saying thanks. Okay, I appreciate that. Okay, any other questions or comments? I do see a question actually direct to me. Were there any Aaron exhibit cards? Yes, definitely. So the exhibit cards are kind of those postcard size cards that sometimes are kind of black, white, grayish, sometimes have a brownish tint, sometimes even have colorful tints, I think, especially if they were Canadian issue. But yeah, Hank Aaron has, to my knowledge, just a single one that came out several years. And so if there are any exhibit collectors out there, you know, for some players like Mickey Mantle, there might be multiple poses. With Hank Aaron, it's always the same pose. And it's difficult. There are ways to date the cards, but this particular Hank Aaron is cataloged as 1947 to 1966. And so what's very funny is if you look at something like the PSA registry for Hank Aaron, you know, these exhibit cards often show up as a player's first card. And occasionally eBay sellers, either out of ignorance or opportunism, will list these exhibits and they'll say things like Hank Aaron's very first card ever, 1947 to 1966. And they'll show his exhibits card. And well, it's just not true. Okay. John Roccadelli asks, which Aaron cards or items are still at the top of the want list? I'm going to say that 1960 Lake to Lake Dairy Hank Aaron was the card I desperately wanted, not only because I think it's a neat card, but its size, kind of normal baseball card size, meant it could go in my top 50 display case. So in contrast, another card I would love is 1959 Hank Aaron Home Run Derby. That is a tough card, but it's also too big for my display case. And so the consolation prize of not having that card is, even if I had it, I wouldn't be able to display it with the rest of my collection. So, but I'd say Home Run Derby is probably at the top of the list at this point, but it is absolutely through the roof. And it's interesting because I had completed most of my collection, most of my Hank Aaron collection a couple of years ago. I had no idea what prices had done just over the last year. You know, I started taking a look the other day, and before he died, by the way, before he died, like when I bought the Lake to Lake Dairy card, I started looking at some Hank Aaron prices, and I thought, oh my God, I could have never put this collection together if I waited till now. Okay, Babe was great in Pride of the Yankees. My favorite Aaron card is that is a really, really tough call. That's probably an impossible question for me to answer, what my favorite Hank Aaron card is. I love the look of his 1962 Topps card, but I love the 1964 Topps stand-up card, and I love the 1974 Topps Home Run King card. I couldn't tell you. It'd be like if I had 6 kids and somebody said, who's your favorite kid? I couldn't tell you publicly, at least. No. All right. Anything else before we call it a day?
Jason, I wonder if you could say a few words about what it was like to meet and speak to Hank.
Oh my gosh. Well, it was a dream come true for sure. I mean, so it happened twice. I mean, in the pregame, no, it happened twice. When I was a kid, I brought about $10 to a card show, and I didn't even know Hank Aaron was going to be there. And Frank Robinson was signing autographs for $2. Hank Aaron was signing autographs for $6. And it came with the 8x10 photo, by the way, which was nice. And then other than that, you could go buy baseball cards. Well, I when I saw they were there, I got both of their autographs and had pretty much nothing left to buy cards. No regrets at all. I still have both signed 8x10s. And in fact, out of my whole childhood collection, that's about all I have left are those 2 signed 8x10s, interestingly enough. Everything else I kind of rebuilt in college. But as a kid, I couldn't even believe it. As a kid, it was like there was nothing in my life that had prepared me for being super close to Hank Aaron. And I got to shake his hand. I got to say something, you know, a nervous kid would say, like, "Hi, you're my favorite player," or something like that. And then I remembered to say thank you. You know what I mean? But it was a completely surreal moment. More recently, though, I was at the 2014 Milwaukee Brewers community, or 2016, pardon me, Milwaukee Brewers Community Foundation's Chasing the Dream event featuring Hank Aaron. Some of you, if you read the recent blog post, know I left the house with my now wife so early, and I'm surprised she stuck with me after the trauma of that event. But I left the house so early, I was not only the first one there, the stadium parking lot was closed when I pulled up. We just had to sit in the car for like over an hour waiting till they opened the gate. But the point is, I got there and I thought I had entered some kind of VIP only, like, you know, pre-party thing, because it was kind of small, intimate, cozy, you know, tables like right up close to where Hank Aaron was going to be on stage. And I thought, well, maybe nobody will notice that just some guy like me is here. And somebody came in and I thought she was going to kick me out. And it turned out, no, this was the event I paid for. And I could sit wherever I wanted. And my wife and I were the only 2 people there. So we were right up at the stage, so much so that I would have just had to reach a foot in front of me to touch Hank Aaron's shoe, which I'm not like that weird. So I didn't do it. I kept thinking about it. I kept thinking I might, but I didn't do it. But he just told stories for an hour. Bob Uecker came out and traded stories with him. He took questions. I got to ask him a question. And it was, you know, I mean, it's hard to top things like getting married, having kids, whatever in your life. But aside from like real life stuff, it was the greatest moment of my life, I think, was spending that time that up close with Hank Aaron. It was just absolutely incredible. And I think he's somebody where if you didn't know any baseball history and you didn't know the record books and you didn't even know he played professional baseball, there's just a majesty that he projects where you know you're in the presence of greatness and it's tangible. Like you can feel it. You're breathing it, you know. I can't even describe it. It was just absolutely amazing. And I think it turned out to be the last year that the Brewers ended up hosting that event, you know, based on his schedule and health and other things. So I feel really lucky that I got to go there. And I got to shake his hand and take my picture with him and all these goofy things. And some of you know, it turned out the event evidently was business casual. So it was mostly guys in Dockers and button shirts and all these things. Well, I didn't pay attention. So I wore my Hank Aaron throwback jersey. I was the only one. I was the only one wearing the Hank Aaron jersey. And he actually like paid me a compliment and thought it was funny that I showed up wearing his jersey. So, but yeah, it was an incredible experience. You know, I feel really fortunate that I got to do that. If you read my piece, you know, especially once we started losing a few Hall of Famers, I'd actually have mornings where I'd get up and the first thing I would do literally was like check Twitter or check CNN or check whatever, just, you know, making sure there was no headline about Hank Aaron, you know, about losing Hank Aaron. And, you know, unfortunately, this past week, the headline finally came. But yeah, just we were losing so many people that I kept thinking like, oh my gosh, well, we still have Hank Aaron. We still have Hank Aaron, you know, let's hope he survives this thing. But anyways, okay. Anything else? I don't want to end on a down note, but all righty. Well, everyone, thank you for indulging me with your time. You know, I think for all of us, just connecting over Hank Aaron in some way, even if it's kind of an oddball tour of his baseball cards, is probably cathartic in some way. I know for me, I binge watched MLB Network yesterday, and that was helpful as well. So thank all of you for being here. Get in touch if you have any other questions. And I'm looking forward to somebody's article on the first card showing players signing autographs. You can send it to me and we'll put it up on the blog. Take care, everybody.
Nice job, Jason.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Good. Thanks.
Thanks so much.